The wind rattled the loose boards of the barn, whistling through cracks like a voice that wanted to be heard. Dust sifted down from the rafters as the rancher's boot heels struck the earth floor, each step slow, heavy, deliberate. A horse snorted outside, iron shoes stamping against dry earth. The widow stood stiff in the doorway, her hand clutching her daughter's shoulder, eyes fixed not on the man, but on the trunk in the far corner. "Please," she whispered, her voice thin as paper. "Don't take the cloth off." The rancher paused, the creak of his belt buckle breaking the silence. His brow was furrowed with the weight of curiosity and something deeper, something that carried both dread and defiance. He turned his head slightly, looking at her from under the brim of his hat. She said nothing more. She only stared, the child pressed tight against her skirts, both of them rooted to the ground as if the earth itself would not let them move. His boots scraped closer. The cloth, old, gray with age and dust, covered a shape long and forgotten, corners tucked in with the care of someone who wanted it hidden, not protected. His gloved hand hovered over it, trembling just a fraction. The barn was so still that even the crows perched on the roof stopped their squabbling to listen. "Don't," the widow said again, stronger this time, though her voice cracked under the weight of memory. But the rancher had already reached down. Fingers curled into the coarse fabric, tugging slow, as though even he was afraid of what might breathe beneath. The cloth rasped as it slid free, stirring the dust into the air. The trunk yawned open. Metal caught the light first, a long, cold gleam that did not belong in such silence. A rifle, its wood scarred and worn, lay across folded remnants of cloth once dyed a deep gray. Beside it, tarnished brass buttons gleamed like tiny eyes in the half-light, their eagle insignias dulled with time. And beneath them, a strip of red cloth, darker than rust, darker than blood. The rancher's hand jerked back. His breath hitched. His shoulders, broad as canyon walls, began to shake. He pressed a hand against the barn wall, knuckles white against the wood. The widow closed her eyes. The child whimpered, not understanding the weight in the air, only feeling its heaviness. The rifle's barrel reflected the sliver of daylight sneaking through the warped barn door. Dust swirled around it like smoke. The rancher stared, the image clawing through layers of memory he had tried to bury. The echo of cannons, the screaming of horses, the smell of black powder thick enough to choke the breath from a man. The silence thickened. Only the barn creaked, groaning like an old witness forced to remember. The rancher lifted the rifle with both hands, but it seemed to burn him. He shook harder, teeth set tight, as though he could bite back the flood rising in him. The widow took a step forward, her face pale but resolute. "You weren't meant to see that," she said. Her words carried no anger, only sorrow. The rancher lowered the rifle back into the trunk, but his gaze wouldn't leave it. He swallowed hard, jaw working. This belonged to him. His voice was rough, as if unused. The widow nodded once. Her hand brushed across her daughter's hair, steadying the child though her own fingers trembled. The rancher's eyes moved to the insignia, the tarnished brass. He rubbed one between his fingertips, leaving a smear of dirt across the dull shine. The weight of it dragged at his chest like a stone. His breath came uneven, shallow. "Why hide it?" he asked, though the question hung lifeless, as though he already knew. "Because the dead are never gone," she said softly, "and what they leave behind can still kill the living." The words seemed to hollow the barn, stretching the silence wider. Outside, the wind moaned across the plains, carrying with it the memory of bugles long silenced. The rancher backed a step, shoulders hunched, as though the trunk's contents were a fire he could not stand too near. He dragged the back of his hand across his mouth. His whole body quaked now, the tremor running through him like an old wound reopening. The widow knelt beside the trunk, her hand hovering above the rifle, not touching, only hovering, as one might over the grave of a loved one, or the cage of something dangerous. She did not look at the rancher when she spoke. "You want to know why I kept this place closed, why I never asked for help, why I live like I do? Now you see." Her words cut the air. The rancher turned away, but not before she caught the wetness in his eyes. He pressed his palms against his knees, hunched like a man who had carried too many coffins. The child whispered, "Mama," but the widow hushed her with a touch. The cloth, fallen in a heap, seemed suddenly small, powerless to cover the truth it had kept hidden. Dust clung to it like old sorrow. The rancher stood there, back stiff, fists clenched, staring at nothing. His chest rose and fell with the weight of battles no one could see. And in the hush of that barn, as light slipped lower and shadows thickened, the air itself seemed to bend with the gravity of what had been uncovered. The storyteller's voice leans in, almost a whisper carried on the wind. And so it began, with the cloth lifted and the past breathing again. A silence broken not by guns, but by the ghosts of men who had once carried them. In that stillness, the earth itself seemed to tremble, for it knew what was coming. The saloon doors slammed open, the sound sharp as a rifle crack. Conversations died, cards stilled mid-shuffle, glasses froze halfway to lips. A rider staggered in, his coat powdered in desert dust, his eyes wild. "They're coming," he rasped, voice scraping dry as gravel. "Riding hard. Men with scars, men with guns." The piano player let his hands fall silent. Dice rattled across the table and lay still. Every man in the room turned his head, slow, heavy, as though they already knew the name of the storm the rider carried on his tongue. Outside, the wind lifted grit into the air, painting the horizon in a sickly haze. Horses tethered at the rail stamped and snorted, sensing what men would not yet say. Back at the widow's ranch, the sky had begun to turn the color of bruised copper. Dust rolled across the fence line, rising and falling like waves. The rancher stood with his hands pressed against the porch rail, staring out into it, his body stiff, his jaw locked. His fingers twitched as though they longed for a gun, but couldn't quite remember how to hold one steady. Behind him, the widow moved with quiet precision. She drew the shutters tight, set the lamps low, and checked the latch on the back door. Her daughter sat cross-legged by the hearth, clutching a rag doll whose seams were coming undone. "Tell me what you saw," the widow said, her voice flat, controlled. The rancher swallowed, but his throat clicked dry. His eyes didn't leave the horizon. Men, outlaws, not the kind who take what they need and ride on. These are the kind who don't stop till they've burned the ground behind them. The widow's eyes flicked toward the barn. She didn't ask which men, because the answer was already written in the dust that clung to the rifle, the buttons, the insignia. Her daughter's voice broke the silence, soft and afraid. "Mama, will they come here?" The widow smoothed her child's hair and answered without hesitation. "Yes." The word landed like a stone in a still pond. The rancher turned his head sharply, as though hoping she would take it back, soften it. She didn't. The wind moaned louder through the canyons. A shutter banged loose and flapped hard against the house. The rancher flinched at the sound, sweat beading on his brow despite the cooling air. "They'll kill for what they think is here," he said. "Gold, land, revenge, don't matter which. It'll be blood, all the same." The widow reached for the worn trunk in the corner, sliding it closer with the strength of someone long used to heavy work. She pulled the rifle free, her hands moving with surety, not hesitation. She set the stock against her knee, wiped the barrel clean with a rag, and checked the sights with practiced eyes. The rancher's breath caught. His hands shook harder, shame prickling across his skin as he watched. "You've handled one of these before," he muttered. The widow did not look up. "Handled, carried, and fired. Don't let the skirts fool you." The scrape of metal, the click of the chamber, the low thud of the stock against the floor, all of it was steady, purposeful. Her movements cut through the rancher like a blade. He tried to steady his own hands by gripping the porch rail tighter, but the tremor only deepened. A hawk cried overhead, circling against the dying light. The horizon was no longer empty. Shapes moved within the storm of dust, riders pushing hard, torches burning faint against the deepening dusk. The earth trembled under the pounding of hooves. The rancher's breath came shallow, uneven. "They'll be here by nightfall." The widow rose, rifle in hand, and finally met his eyes. "Then nightfall will find us ready." The child clung to her mother's skirts, eyes wide, the rag doll pressed so tightly to her chest its stitched smile twisted. Inside the saloon, the rider who had brought the warning downed a whiskey with shaking hands. "They're headed for her place," he told the room, low and certain. "The widow's ranch. They aim to finish what they started years ago." Men shifted uneasily. No one volunteered a word of help. They stared into their glasses, into their cards, anywhere but at one another. For everyone in town knew the kind of men who came with the dust, and they knew the debts they carried. Back at the ranch, the rancher finally tore his eyes from the horizon. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I fought once. Wore a uniform. Thought I was fighting for something that mattered. But the killing don't leave a man. It rots him from the inside out. I ain't sure I can hold a gun again." The widow's grip on the rifle did not waver. "Then don't," she said coldly. "I'll do it." Her words cut him deeper than any blade. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his own weakness. He looked at her, the calm fire in her face, the steadiness in her hands. And for the first time, he understood he was not the strong one here. The wind howled, carrying grit against the windows, rattling the roof. The horses in the corral reared and whinnied, kicking against the boards. The torches on the horizon glowed brighter, closer, like the eyes of predators stalking their prey. The widow moved to the window, lifting the curtain just an inch. She watched the storm draw nearer, her face unreadable, her stance unyielding. The child whispered again, trembling, "Mama, what if God don't hear us?" The widow lowered the curtain, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered back, "Then we make him." The storyteller's voice cuts low, carrying like a hush across a firelit circle. The wind carries more than dust out here. It carries names and debts unpaid. And when men ride with scars and torches, it is not the land they hunger for, but the ghosts who haunt it. On that night, the desert held its breath, for justice was coming, one way or another. The first torchlight flared against the horizon, a pinprick of fire swallowed in dust. Another followed, then another, until the line of riders burned like embers in the dark. Their hooves drummed against the desert floor, the sound rolling low and steady, like thunder building in the belly of the earth. The widow knelt in the barn, the rifle laid across her lap. She dragged an oiled rag down the barrel, the motion sure and silent. The lantern beside her flickered, throwing long shadows across the walls. Her face was carved in concentration, her hands steady as stone. The rancher lingered near the doorway, his palms slick, his chest tight. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. Only the creak of the barn door answered him, swaying on its hinges as the wind pressed harder. The widow snapped the rifle shut, chambered around, and rose to her feet. She moved with the certainty of someone who had already decided. Her daughter stood barefoot in the dirt, clutching the rag doll, watching every motion with wide, unblinking eyes. The rancher's voice cracked at last. "There's too many." The widow slung the rifle across her shoulder, eyes fixed on the approaching glow. "Then there'll be too many graves." Outside, the night thickened. Coyotes howled from the canyon rim, their cries weaving through the hoofbeats. The wind carried the dry taste of sage and smoke, stinging the eyes, burning the lungs. The rancher stumbled to the fence line, gripping the post so hard his knuckles blanched. He could see them clearly now, faces hard and scarred, mouths set in cruel smiles, rifles strapped to their backs, pistols at their sides. He swallowed hard, but it stuck in his throat like a stone. Behind him, the widow moved with quiet command. She hauled sacks of grain against the barn doors, rolled barrels into place, and set a lantern high where its glow would blind approaching eyes. The ranch was turning into a fortress, piece by piece. The child's whisper cut through the clatter. "Mama, will they come inside?" The widow crouched, brushed a hand against her daughter's cheek, and spoke in a low, steady tone. "Not if I stand." The girl clutched the doll tighter, its stitched mouth stretched into a crooked smile. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, closer, like war drums now, shaking the ground beneath their boots. The rancher wiped his palms against his trousers, but the tremor in his hands only worsened. He drew the pistol from his belt, raised it, and lowered it again. His shoulders sagged. The widow stood beside him, rifle steady, eyes unblinking. "If you can't hold it, then don't," she said, her voice sharp but not cruel. "A shaking hand kills more friends than foes." The words struck him deeper than any bullet. He turned away, shame burning hotter than the torchlight. The riders crested the last rise, their silhouettes thrown against the night sky. A ragged flag flapped above them, marked with a crude skull scrawled in ash. Their leader rode ahead, a man with a scar splitting his jaw and a hat pulled low. His voice carried across the plain, rough and mocking. "Widow, you got something belongs to us. Bring it out, or we'll take it from your bones." The wind howled in the silence that followed. The widow lifted the rifle, sighting down the barrel. Her voice rang out, clear as a bell. "All I got is land and a grave. You'll leave with one or the other." A roar of laughter answered her. The gang spread wide, circling, torches blazing. Horses screamed and reared, iron flashing in the light. The rancher's breath hitched, his body locked tight, paralyzed between memory and fear. He heard cannon fire in his head, smelled the blood and powder of battlefields long gone. His hands refused him. The widow stepped forward, boots crunching on the hard ground. She dropped to one knee, leveled a rifle, and fired. The cracks split the night like lightning. A torch burst apart in the dust, flames snuffed in an instant. The gang reined up, shouting curses, their leader's smile curling into something darker. The child clapped her hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. The riders regrouped, fanning out wider, circling like wolves. The widow reloaded in a single practice motion. Her breath was steady, her gaze hard. The rancher's chest heaved. He stared at her, disbelief and awe cutting through the fog of his fear. She was not trembling. She was not faltering. She was a wall of iron in the storm. The leader raised his hand, and the gang surged forward. The ground quaked beneath them, the air filling with smoke and dust. The rancher stumbled back, pistol shaking in his grip. He wanted to run, wanted to hide, but his feet held him in place, as though the earth itself demanded he stay. The widow fired again. A rider toppled, his horse screaming as it bolted into the dark. Another shot split the air, then another, each strike a hammer of thunder. The barn glowed with torchlight, the flames throwing the widow's shadow tall and sharp against its walls. She moved with calm precision, every motion deliberate, every breath steady. The rancher could no longer look away. His chest burned, his throat tight, as he realized the truth dawning clear before him. She had carried this strength all along, hidden beneath silence and sorrow. It was not her husband's legend that lingered here. It was hers. The riders closed in, their shouts rising, their torches flaring. The storm had gathered, and it pressed hard against the ranch, demanding blood. The storyteller's voice leans low, carried like smoke through the firelight. When the desert night holds its breath, the earth remembers the tread of those who stand unbroken. The storm had come to her doorstep, but storms are not only met, they are endured. And sometimes they're broken. Gunfire split the night. Sparks flared off the barn wall as bullets chewed into the boards. Horses screamed, hooves pounding, torches hurled high. Flames licked the dry wood, catching fast, casting a cruel glow across the ranch. The widow knelt in the dirt, rifle pressed to her shoulder, sight fixed sharp. Each shot cracked like thunder. A rider toppled backward. Another dropped his torch into the dust. Smoke rose thick, curling into the black sky. The child crouched low behind a trough, her small hands pressed tight over her ears. The rag doll lay face down in the dirt beside her, its stitched grin smeared in mud. The rancher stood rigid in the shadows of the porch, pistol trembling in his grip. His jaw clenched, his breath ragged. The fire's light threw his face in harsh relief, the fear carved deep into it. He lifted the gun, sighted it, lowered it again. His body betrayed him, shaking too hard to hold steady. The widow fired again, her voice cutting through the storm. "Keep back." The gang jeered, their leader spurring forward, scarred jaw glinting in the light. His pistol barked, the shot splintering wood inches from her head. She didn't flinch. She pivoted, fired, and sent another man sprawling lifeless into the dust. The fire spread along the barn roof, beams groaning as smoke thickened the air. Ash drifted down like snow, clinging to her hair, her shoulders. The rancher staggered forward at last, feet dragging through the dirt. His pistol jerked upward, shaking wildly as he fired. The shot went wide, harmless, swallowed by the night. Laughter rose from the gang. His hands fell limp to his sides, shoulders bowed under the weight of his own failure. The widow did not look at him. Her eyes were locked on the riders, her stance steady, her rifle reloaded with swift, practiced hands. She fired again, each strike a hammer of resolve. The gang's charge faltered, fear creeping in where arrogance had lived. The leader roared, rallying them. She's only one. But in the firelight, she did not look like one. She looked like many. The flames threw her shadow high, stretched tall across the burning barn, a figure vast and unyielding, as if the desert itself had risen to fight beside her. The child lifted her head from her hands, eyes wide, watching her mother stand against the storm. The widow's next shot shattered the leader's hat from his head. He reined hard, teeth bared, rage boiling in his scarred face. He raised his pistol, aimed dead at her chest. The rancher moved then, as if ripped awake. With a cry that broke more from pain than courage, he stumbled into the open, gun raised. His shot cracked wild again, but it drew the leader's aim, pulled his fire. The bullet slammed into the rancher's shoulder, spinning him back into the dirt. The widow seized the instant. Her rifle boomed, echoing through the canyon. The leader jerked stiff, torchlight flaring across the sudden bloom of red on his shirt. He toppled from his saddle, hitting the ground with a hollow thud. Silence fell hard. The gang reined up, eyes wide, torches wavering. One by one, they turned their mounts, curses muttered low, fear breaking their will. Hooves thundered as they fled into the desert night, swallowed by dust and darkness. The flames roared higher, consuming the barn. The widow lowered her rifle, breath steady, chest heaving slow. Ash drifted down around her, glowing embers painting her in firelight. She turned to the rancher. He lay in the dirt, blood seeping through his shirt, his pistol fallen from his hand. His eyes searched hers, shame and awe tangled together. It was you, he rasped. Not him. It was always you. The widow knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his wound, her face unreadable. Legends don't wear names, she said. They wear truth. The child ran to her mother, clutching her waist, eyes bright with both terror and pride. She looked down at her mother and whispered, trembling, God brought you here. The widow gathered her daughter close, her gaze still fixed on the horizon where the riders had vanished. Smoke curled into the stars, the ranch smoldering, the night heavy with silence once more. The storyteller's voice settles, low and final, as if spoken by firelight. And so it ended, not with the rancher's hand, nor the ghost of a husband's name, but with the widow's rifle, steady as the desert stone. They say her shadow still stands tall in the ash of that barn, a reminder carved in fire and dust, that when storms came for her land, it was not fear they found waiting, but legend.